Welcome to the scenes lesson. In this lesson, we're going to show you how to use scenes and how to mix multiple objects into a scene. Scenes are a key feature of the Designer Studio since it allows you to mix multiple objects, whether these will be components or resources, into a single canvas and then take that scene and drag and drop it into a channel within your timeline. So first, let's go ahead and compare just using an object directly on the channel versus using a scene. So I'll switch over here to my components and take a label, drag and drop this label onto this channel, and I'll double click on it to load up its properties and type something in its text field. And so right now what's happening is that this particular label is going to occupy the full size of the screen division. And so the label will by default appear at the upper left corner or X0, Y0 of the screen division. But what if you wanted to mix other content? What if you wanted to put a resource or an image just below the hello world? And what if you also wanted to mix in an RSS feed? So the ability to mix other content onto the same channel is not possible unless you add multiple screen divisions, and then it becomes very difficult to manage. And so scenes allow you to create a canvas where you can mix all this content together. So let's go ahead and delete this label right here. And now we'll go ahead and switch to the scenes. And if you're not seeing the scenes module, you can go ahead and enable it under the navigation and the scene editor. So right now we have one scene. Let's go ahead and add another scene. So we'll click on the plus sign right here. So we just went ahead and added a new scene. The first thing you want to do is just give it a name. So select the scene tab properties and call it our demo scene and press enter to save it. And so just like we did before, we're going to switch to components, go down to the label, select it, drag and drop it to the canvas, and notice that now I have full control over the XY position of this label. Let's go ahead and give it a name. And now if I wanted to put an image just below it, I can switch to my resources, select an image, drag and drop it, and there you have it. I can also do things like multiple selection, so it's going to be very simple to move things together, multiple resize. So the scene really gives you a lot of tools to create content within that canvas that you can work with. Next, let's go ahead and add some live components like an RSS feed. That will be easy. Just switch to the components, select the RSS news. Let's go to its properties and set this to be horizontal. And just like before, it appears nicely within the scene. We can click on play to preview the scene, and you can see that the ticker is moving across with the news. Let's go ahead and do one more thing and change the background of the scene. So click on the background to load up its properties. Go to the common and background, and we'll go ahead and set up a gradient color. Now let's go ahead and preview our scene inside the channel on the timeline. So click on the timelines, switch over here to scenes, select our demo scene, drag and drop it to the blue channel, and we'll double click on the demo scene to preview what we've designed. So as you can see, we've mixed a resource, an RSS feed, and a label all into a single screen division that was assigned to the channel. Next, let's talk about the width and the height of the scene. So right now we can see that we've assigned the scene to the blue channel, and this blue channel is assigned right over here. So if we switch to the screen types, we can see that the scene that we've created is going to reside in this particular screen division, and this screen division is set to be 524 width and 376 height. And therefore, if you don't want to get any skewing or content that's going to get moved around, you want to make sure that when you create a scene, you set it to be the same width and height as the screen division that it's going to reside in. Now keep in mind that scenes will expand or contract to always fill the whole area of a screen division. However, if you create this scene that doesn't match the width and the height of the screen division, content can get moved around. And to kind of help with that, we have a special feature called constraints. So we'll show you how to configure constraints in just a second. So let's go ahead and switch back to our scene editor. So we have this scene right here that is set to be 400 by 400, and obviously that's not going to fit the screen division that we looked at earlier. So we have to change the width to 524 and the height to 376, and now it's going to match exactly the width and the height of the screen division it's going to reside in. And since everything matches, if I go to resources, for example, and I pick an image and drag and drop it, doesn't matter where I drop it, it's going to be exactly at that position in the scene, and everything is going to look proper because again everything is built to the pixel. However, if I set the width and the height of the scene to be, let's say, larger than the actual screen division, let's go ahead and make this maybe 650 by 200, then this image is not going to be positioned exactly where we see it now because the scene is going to get stretched. And to deal with that, we have the constraints. So to understand constraints, let's go ahead and select this SWF, this vector image, and go to its position and size. And you can see over here that we have constraints checkboxes. Now if we take this image, for example, and we move it right here to the upper left corner, and we want to make sure that it's always locked to this particular position, we can simply check these boxes off for the upper left corner and set the value for 0, 0. And right now what's going to happen is that regardless of how small or how big this scene gets, this particular resource is always going to be locked. If, for example, we wanted this object to always be at dead center, we could set the constraints to be at 0, 0. And now the resource will always be at the center of the scene. And so what's great about this is that, again, regardless of how big or small the scene gets, you're setting a constraint or a value that the resource is always going to be set to. And let's say, for example, that we wanted this particular resource to occupy the full size of the scene, but have a 20 pixel gap from each corner. So what we can do is we can use all the side constraints and set a value of 20. Go ahead and zoom out. And now this resource is always going to have 20 pixels of gap regardless if the scene matches the screen division or not. And so constraints allow you to create a relative path to the scene rather than use an absolute path when dealing with XY coordinates. In fact, one thing to notice is that as soon as I switch to constraints, you no longer have the XY coordinates values available to you because now you're dealing with relative values rather than absolute values. Next, we're going to talk about the layout manager. So like I showed you before, when you drag objects to the scene, you can position them any way you like using your mouse. So if I switch over here to my component and take multiple labels and drag and drop them, let's go ahead and copy and paste. I can position these objects any way I like. I can do multiple selection and drag and drop them, just like that. However, we also have over here under the properties of the scene a layout manager. So if I select the background to select the scene, or if I select over here under the outline the scene to load up its properties, I gain access to the layout manager of the scene. So I'll go ahead and select the layout manager, and you can see right now I'm set as basic layout. And again, this gives me the ability to just move stuff around. But if I go ahead and set this to be a vertical layout, you can see that everything nicely aligns in a vertical mode. I can also set horizontal as well as tile. I'll go ahead and copy and paste a few more labels so you can appreciate the tile. You can see right now that all my labels are tiling across. Let's go ahead and make a little bit more room here so we can see the rest of the canvas. And look at some of the properties that we can change for the layout manager. So again, select the background to select the actual scene. So if, for example, I increase the padding on top, you'll see that all items will slide to the bottom of the scene. If I set the vertical layout and I set a padding to the top, again, you'll get the same behavior. If you set the gap, you'll see that the labels will start shrinking or getting closer to another and also increase. So you have all these different parameters you can set for the layout manager. And this can become very useful, for example, if you're building a food menu board or a building directory. So the layout manager allows you to easily manage all these items within the scene. One of the really cool things you can do with scenes is use animation. So let's go ahead and drag over a label component. And also we'll go ahead and drag another resource. And we'll go ahead and apply animation to these. So the first thing we'll do is just change the fonts and the colors. And let's say that we wanted this label to actually fly into the scene. So we're going to go to its position and size and set a dynamic effect. And the dynamic effect is actually built from 2 points, a starting point and an end point. And you can apply this effect to pretty much anything. You can apply this to any dynamic components, to any resources. So any component within the system can have dynamic effect applied to it. So for the first point, we'll actually set the position, or rather the X position of this label to be at -200. So it's actually off the screen. And for the second point, we'll go ahead and set this to be a default value of 55 for the X position. And let's go and click on play and see what happens. And you can see that the label is kind of moving into the scene. Now the system is very flexible because it allows you to create twinning or animation on any property. So if you want to create a dynamic width or height or a dynamic rotation, so any value can be animated. Now let's go ahead and apply easing, which is going to give it a more elastic or more real-life effect. So let's go ahead and select out elastic big and go ahead and click on play to preview. And you can see that now it kind of bounces around. Let's go ahead and do it again. So it has a nice elastic move to it. Now if you ever wanted to load up the properties of an object that you can't see because it has an opacity of 0, or if it's on a negative value like here with the label, right now it's on a -200 so we can't see it, just remember that you can always pick it here from the outline. So the outline allows you to see all the objects that are currently within your scene, and you can always just toggle and click on each one to load up its properties. Next, let's go ahead and add a couple of more animations. This time we'll apply these animations to the cube. So let's go ahead and select the cube and go to the common properties. We're going to start off with a blur effect. So again, go to dynamic to apply animation. And what we'll do is for the first point, we'll actually set it to be a very high blur of 255 for the X and 50 for the Y. And for the second point, we're actually going to wait 3 seconds before the animation will kick in, and then go ahead and run the animation for 4 seconds. So 3000 milliseconds before it kicks in, 4000 milliseconds or 4 seconds will be the duration of the effect. But let's not finish just yet. Let's go ahead and add one more animation that's going to run in parallel with our blur effect. So we'll switch back to the position and size, and we'll set this again to be dynamic. Set our first point just like right now where everything is at default, but for the second point we'll go ahead and set the 360-degree turn and set, just like before, a delay of 3 seconds, and we're going to set the animation to run for 4 seconds. Let's go ahead and click on play to preview the presentation, and you can see that right now 3 seconds before the cube starts moving, and we'll play the animation for 4 seconds, playing both animations at the same time, the movement and the blur. So you can easily stack as many animations as you like. So animation allows you to create captivating content very easily within the scene. Next, we'll talk about the display level, so you can control the height of each object within the scene in reference to other objects. So let's go ahead and switch to resources. Go ahead and drag over a couple more cubes. And you can see right here that the cubes overlap one another, this cube being the topmost. Now if I wanted to actually have this cube be the lowest one, all I have to do is select it. Go ahead and make it a little bit larger so it overlaps everything else, and then select this arrow key right here to bring it down. So now you can see that it's actually have converted from being the topmost to the lowest cube below everything else. Now when you're dealing with stacking, sometimes it's difficult to select particular objects, especially if you have a lot of objects. So what you can do is you can select an item and lock it in place using the icon. And what's going to happen is that you won't be able to drag it by mistake. Now it's locked in place. Now if you wanted to do multi-selection and select these two objects, you can always hold on the control key and select the background, in this case the cube below, and you'll still be able to generate a rectangular box or a selection box and select the items that you want. Now let's go ahead and talk about our last topic for this tutorial, which is the scene redirect. So with the scene redirect, you can essentially add buttons to your scene and allow touch control for a person to navigate from one scene to the next. So let's go ahead and add a couple more scenes, and we'll name each scene. Call the first one Scene 1. Scene 2, and we'll call the last one Scene 3. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and put under the first scene the submit button right here, which is really just an image, and we'll go ahead and under its definition make it an interactive object and call it submit. Next we'll switch to the scene, and under its events properties we'll go ahead and add a new event. We'll take this target icon and drag and drop it on the submit button. Anytime somebody clicks on this submit button, we're going to go jump into a particular scene, and for that we'll switch over to the scene, select our second scene, and drag and drop it over here to bind it. So essentially when a person clicks on submit within scene 1, the scene will get redirected into scene 2. Now let's go ahead and switch to our second scene, and over here we'll go ahead and drag over a couple of components. We'll go ahead and drag over another submit button. Again, make it interactive. We'll go ahead and call it our submit 2, and we'll go ahead and add the label as well, so we'll know that we are in our scene 2. And go ahead, select the scene. Just like before, go to the events, add a new event, bind this event to this interactive button, and this time we'll go ahead and associate scene 3. And now let's go ahead and switch to our scene 3, and again add another button. This time we'll make it a button that's going to be different. Make it interactive. We'll call it our submit 3. Just like before, an event, associate the event, and we'll go ahead and jump into scene 1. Essentially creating a loop. Now let's go ahead and switch to our timelines and go ahead and drag our first scene, double click to load the scene, and we'll go ahead and click on the submit button, and you can see that we went ahead and jumped into our scene 2 as indicated by the label, and go ahead and click on the submit again, and now we switch to our third scene, and again click on it to jump back to our first scene. So the scene redirect is just a simple way to add interactivity to scenes and allows you to navigate from one scene to the next. Just as a quick side note, we also support the collection, which is a much more involved feature that allows you to create also interactive scene navigation, but we have a whole different video tutorial for that. So I hope you enjoyed this long video on introduction to the scene, and thank you for watching.